Hi, it's Megan from Sew and Tell Australia, and today I'm working with Peekaboo Patterns to sew up their Bear Hug Wrap Romper. Today I'm excited to be sewing up the Bear Hug Wrap Romper from Peekaboo Patterns. It is so cute, this one. It's got a gorgeous wrap over at the front. Underneath it's got a cute little snap here to keep it all under wraps, and it is just an adorable pattern. So this one comes in a size preemie and goes all the way up to a size 24 months, and there are so many different options that make it super versatile. So some of the options are you can have short sleeves or long sleeves. With the long sleeve version, you can either have cuffs or fold over cuffs, which are always good when you've got teething babies or if they've got rough nails as newborns and they're scratching their face. There is also a footed and a fold over footed version as well. So you can sort of use it as a bit of a grow with me style as well as keep their feet nice and warm. And then there's also an option for an inseam snap placket, which is always good for those late night nappy changes. Today I'm going to keep it fairly simple. I'm going to make a long sleeve foot cuff version. So we're not doing footies or anything. I'm just doing the cuffs, and I'm not going to do the snap placket this time. We're just going to make it very much exactly like this. I might just make, a different size. I think this is a size 12 months. My children don't sleep in these anymore, so I always use these as a good reason to sort of make up some gifts that I can have sitting there for when my friends have babies. So I might even do like maybe a size 0 to 3 months. We'll see. But it is super cute, and I can't wait to get started. So just a couple of things before we start. You do need to have knit fabric with at least a 40% stretch. That's really important for this one. I'm going to be using a fabric from Wattle Hill Fabrics here in Australia, and I'm going to be trimming it with this gorgeous rust solid. It is also really important to make sure you've got the correct needles. So I'm going to be using my serger for a lot of it, but I am actually going to be using my normal domestic sewing machine as well for a lot of the binding area. So this I'm going to be doing on my normal domestic machine, and it's really important that you have the correct needle when you're working with stretch fabric so you don't get any skipped stitches or popped stitches. So I will be using my domestic machine for that. I also like to use clips when I'm sewing with knits. I just find it a little bit easier. There will be occasions when I use pins for it, but generally I use clips. And I will also probably demonstrate how to use double-sided tape when we're doing the knit binding, which is a secret little trick that makes it a little bit easier to sew the knit binding nice and neatly on the back. So I'm going to cut my pieces out with my projector. I'm a projector sewist, so I'm going to take you over to my projector. We're going to cut the pieces out, and then we can get started with sewing our Bear Hug Romper. Let's get started. I've loaded up my projector pieces here. I've got a brand new blade in my rotary cutter. So now all I'm going to do is cut my pieces out. So one of the things I love about my projector is obviously I can do some pretty nifty pattern placement. So I can sort of check where everything's going to sit, which is always nice. So I'm going to pop this down here. I also have a big sheet of galvanized steel under my mat so that I can use these magnets just to hold my fabric down, which is always handy. So I'm going to cut out my pattern pieces. I've got one of the backs. This is one of the other good things about having a projector. You can sort of cut out your pieces fairly easily. It is the same process whether you use a projector or paper pattern pieces though. You would just lay your pattern pieces out on your fabric and cut out the ones that you need. So that is our first piece done. I'm going to put that to the side, and now I am just going to move my front pieces across. Now it's important to make sure that you do cut mirrored pieces on your fronts. So when we talk about mirrored pieces, we just mean opposites. So it's important to make sure you get opposites, because otherwise your Bear Hug Romper won't look right. So this is one of the main reasons that I wanted to use my projector as well. I wanted to really make sure I was getting quite cute pattern placement for the front. So I'm going to pop that there. So I'll have this cute piece on the front because this is the bit that's going to wrap over. And I'll have this cute little cloud in the corner, like so. And I would normally cut it doubled up, but because I want to make sure I'm getting nice pattern placement, I'm actually just going to cut them one at a time. It is also really important that you mark all your notches on this pattern because there is quite a bit that we're going to be sort of lining up with the tabs and the twill tape and all those different bits. It's just really important that you mark the notches. So whether you cut them out or you use a piece of tailor's chalk or however you mark your patterns, just make sure that you are marking them. So there is a little notch here that I'm going to mark on the inside. So I've just got some tailor's chalk. So that is that piece done, and now I can flip it over like so. And now I know that I'm getting a mirrored piece for my second piece. So I'm going to cut these out, and then I'll also cut out the sleeves, and then I'll come back when I'm ready to cut out the binding pieces, just so you know which pieces we're going to cut out. These are the parts that you need to decide what you're going to be doing. So there's obviously the leg cuffs, but we've also got the fold over cuffs, the long sleeve cuff. This is the binding that you need to cut. So you need to cut one of these on the fold. You need to cut 2 Bear Hug ties. And then these ones, you need to decide if you're doing a snap placket. And obviously we've got the twill tape, so that's what's going to help hold these snaps. And then you've also got, if you're doing the footed ones, the footed tighties. So I've already cut out my 2 sleeves, so I've got my leg cuffs and my sleeves. And now I just need to cut out my Bear Hug binding. And I also need to cut out my twill. So I might do that now while I've got the tape. And all I'm going to do is I just need to cut, I think it's one of these, twill tape A, and one of twill tape B. So I've got my twill tape cut. Now I am going to cut my knit binding. Again, it is super important that we mark out all these different notches and markers because they are going to help us when we are putting the binding on. So the binding is probably the most challenging of the entire sew, and it's going to take you the most amount of time. But there is no reason why you can't get a beautiful finish. So I'm going to mark my little ties like this. Then I'm going to get my tailor's chalk and mark here. And I'm going to make sure I do both sides. It's important that I do both sides. These are actually your shoulder placement marks. And then obviously we've got, oh, I'm losing everything, our other little placement notches there. So that is my knit binding done. So now all I need to do, and maybe it might be big enough, the tie pieces, I might get lucky. I think I'll just be able to get my tie pieces out of this here. So that's always a bonus. So I will cut out my tie pieces and then we can start to put it together. Probably should have anchored this down. Oh well. Alright, there's my tie pieces, so I'm all set. To recap all the pieces we need before we start putting it together, so we've got our fronts, our 2 mirrored fronts. We have a back. We have our 2 sleeves. So I've done the long sleeves. We've got 2 gusset pieces. So they're these tiny little pieces here, which I didn't mark one of them. I need to do that. Then we've got our 2 twill tapes. We've got our A and B twill tapes. We have got our sleeve cuffs, our leg cuffs. We've got a long knit binding piece. And then we've got our 2 ties. So as long as you've got all those pieces, we can start with the next step. The first step that we're actually going to work on is attaching our twill tape. So I'm going to be using my domestic machine for this one. So I will load that up with the coordinating thread, and then I'll take you to the domestic machine and we can attach our twill tape and sew the knit ties before we start putting it together with our serger. To prepare our pieces, we need to lay our 2 fronts with the wrong side up, so you want the right side facing down. And we're going to get our twill piece A, which is the longer piece. We're going to fold it in half and line it up with the notch on the left piece at the side. And then we're going to get our twill tape B, that's a tongue twister, and align it with our notch on the right side at the front. So we're going to clip those on. So that is those pieces. We're then going to get our ties. I've got our ties and we're going to sew them right sides together, and you can either clip them or just sew however you like, but we're folding them in half. Can be a bit tricky. You may want to give them a bit of a press, but we're going to sew leaving one end open but along the top of the raw edge and down the side. Now it's important to do this on your sewing machine, because if you do it with your serger, you will likely find it very difficult to turn it the other way around. So I'm going to take you over to my sewing machine and we will sew these pieces. Again, it's really important to make sure you've got the correct needle in here. So I'm using a Schmetz Stretch 9014. So as long as you've got a stretch or a jersey one in here, stretch is better because it's designed for fabrics with cotton elastane in them. So, well, as long as if you are using a fabric with elastane in it, the stretch needle is better. So I have set my stitch length to a 3. My tension is on auto. And now I'm just going to sew along the edge. I'm not going to worry about back stitching it because it is actually going to get caught in the side seam when we tie it all up. So all I'm going to do is sew along the edge sort of as straight as I can. You can go as slowly as you need to. So I'm going along the edge here, all the way to the end. I'm going to stop about 2/8 or 1/8 of an inch before, turn it around, and then I'm going to go off to the edge. I would like to back stitch this bit a little bit. It can be a bit tricky with knits. We'll do our best. But that is our first tie done, and we're going to repeat to the other one. It's a bit wavy, but don't worry too much about that. So repeat to the other side, and then we will do the next step with the ties. I will just show you attaching the twill tapes. So we're going to put it in our side seam. We're going to do a bit of a back stitch. Even though it does get caught in the side seams, it's a good idea to do a little bit of a back stitch. So that's our first one done. And then we're going to grab our second twill tape. And again, we're going to place it to the front side. And this does, as I said, get caught under the knit binding, but it's just a good idea to back stitch it as well. So we've got our extra stability. But that is both our twill tapes attached and ready to go. Now we're going to turn our ties out. So I'm just going to clip these corners, making sure I'm being very careful not to clip through my stitches. You can clip your threads as well if you want to. I always just find it a little bit easier. Now I have a loop turner, but you can use a safety pin or a chopstick or a loop turner. But essentially, we're going to then turn our loops the right way around. And this is why it's really important to make sure that you've done it on your sewing machine and not your serger, because there just isn't enough seam allowance for you to do it on your serger. You would end up finding it really difficult to turn out. So that is my first one done, and I can repeat to the other side. These make it really handy, and I can share a link in the description for anybody that wants to get one. They're great for doing scrunchies as well. So that is my loops turned. I'll just sort of finger roll out the corners, but I now have my 2 ties ready to go. To attach our ties, we're going to get our front pieces back again. So I've got, you want to have your left piece, so the piece with the twill tape on the side facing down, and you want your piece with the twill tape on the flap facing up. So you'll essentially have them both facing the same way, and you're going to get one of your ties and the raw edge, so the edge that isn't enclosed, you're going to attach to the flap side, so it will look like this. And then the other one, you're going to get your raw edge and attach to the side like this. So it should look like this. I'm now going to use my sewing machine and I'm going to sew these on. Essentially I'm basting them because they will again end up either in a seam or under the binding, but I'll attach these on before we move on. Now that we've prepared our flap pieces, so we've got our ties on and our twill tape on both, we can now use our serger to start the construction. So I'm going to change over the threads in my serger because I don't have the right ones in, but I'll change over the threads and then I'll take you to the overhead camera and we will start with constructing and doing the knit binding. To start with, we're going to get our back piece and lay it right side up. And then we're going to get our front pieces and lay them right side down so that we have right sides facing together, or printed sides facing together. And we're just going to clip these shoulder seams like this. And now I'm going to take it to my serger and we're just going to serge across the top of these shoulder seams. I've serged across the top of the shoulders now, so I'm going to put that to the side, and what we're actually going to do is prepare our binding piece. So I'm going to take you over to my iron, but essentially what we're going to do is fold it in half and give it a really good press. Now, a lot of stretch fabrics don't hold their press, or their, don't stay together like a woven would. So it's going to be a little bit more like a memory press, if anything. But I'm going to steam it and pop it under my iron so that I can give it a really good memory press. And that's just going to help when we're attaching the binding. So I'm going to take you over to my iron and we can do that folding and steaming now. I've got my binding here, so I'm going to fold these in half. I've got my iron. I'm just going to give it a really, really good press. Like this. I've got it with the right sides facing out, so wrong sides together. And like I mentioned, it's not really going to hold the press, but it is going to give it a bit of a memory press so that you can at least sort of see where halfway is, like where the halves are. So I'm just going to continue to fold and press this all the way along. I have memory pressed all along here. So now what you can do is fold it over again, like not even 1/4 of an inch. Probably about 1/4 of an inch actually. And just gently press it along. This is a really tricky bit, so if you don't want to do it, you don't have to, but it can help make a difference when you're attaching your binding and just getting a really clean finish, but it is a bit tricky. So I'm going to go along and finish doing that folding up 1/4 edge and just memory pressing it. And then I'll take you back to my overhead camera and we can start putting the binding on. I've pressed and folded my knit binding. So now I'm going to get my main pieces and we're going to start to attach the binding. Now my biggest piece of advice for this is to go slow because it is a little bit fiddly and a little bit tricky, but if you take your time and go slow, you will get such beautiful results. So I'll take you back to the overhead camera and I can show you how I attach my binding, and hopefully you get a few pointers on how to make it look really beautiful. To start with, we're going to find all our little notches. So we've got a notch here. I think my other ones must have, oh no, there's one. So I've got my shoulder notch there, and then I can just double check. So you can always just fold it in half again, match up your notches. Got one notch there and one notch there. Great, they are still there. And I will actually just pop a pin in the middle, so I know that's my center back. Now I'm going to get this. It can help to just trim off any sort of wayward serger threads, just so you don't get confused with what you're doing. So I'll trim those off. I'm going to find my center back, and we're going to attach this with your right sides together. So you want your knit binding to be right sides together to your garment. And now we're going to line up the points. So we've got, this point is a shoulder point, so we're going to align it here. And you should have a little bit of stretch in it, so it is a bit shorter than what the garment is. So again, I'll do this here. So when we attach it, you'll see I'm just going to be gently stretching the knit binding to fit. Now we're going to get our next notch, which is this one, and we're going to align it with our notch on our wrap. Like this. And then we should also be aligning the bottom of our binding with the bottom of our wrap piece. So again, when we're attaching this, we'll be gently stretching it to fit between the points. So I'll just repeat on the other side. So again, grabbing that notch and aligning it. Now this is where we're going to have to be careful and make sure we don't serge off our knit tie. There. And then pop this down here. So now we're going to take this to our serger and we're going to serge all the way along our knit binding. Alright, so I'm starting at one end. Just going to get that under my presser foot. And I like to get a few stitches on just so it's secure. And then I'm going to just make sure that I've got two raw edges aligned. So I've got my garment edge and my knit binding edge. And then I'm just going to gently stretch between the 2 points. And I'm going to trim off a tiny little bit as I go. And then this is where we want to make sure our knit tie is out of the way. So I'm going to pop that to the side underneath. And then again, just sort of maneuver my fabric around so that I can Now sew around this little corner, making sure I don't trim off my tie. And now I can just make sure that I've gently stretched between the 2 points again. So we're up to our shoulder seam. Gentle stretching. Across the back here. And then down the other shoulder side. So it is just a lot of kind of maneuvering and moving the fabric to what feels comfortable and making sure you're catching all the edges. So we're coming up to our twill tape side this time. So we just want to make sure that's nice and enclosed. So, and then bring it all the way around, and I just like to sort of pre-prepare my next little piece. And now we can go off to the end. You should have a piece that looks like this now. So if we lay it out, we've got our pieces here. So this is the part that is probably the most tricky, and all I can say is take it slow. So what we're doing is we're wanting to enclose these serged or sewn edges. What we're going to do is we're going to push the knit binding up and have your seam up as well. Then where we pre-folded it and ironed it, which it doesn't really keep very well, so just do what you can. We're going to fold it over, so we've got that little quarter edge seam, and then we're going to fold it over again over the top of that serged seam. And we're just going to continue to do that all the way along. So this is where it's really helpful if you've got double-sided tape. I'm going to show you a few where I use pins, and then I'm also going to use the double-sided tape. So I like to sew it from the front, because then I know I get a nice clean edge. What I'm going to do is flip it over. I'm going to get my pins. It's important to have sharp pins as well, or ballpoint pins. And I like to just put a pin in from the front and know that I've caught the back properly, because that's important when you come to sew it. Use as many pins as you need to. You shouldn't really need to stretch it because you've already stretched it when you've sewn. But it's really just a case of going along bit by bit, folding over that little edge, folding it over your seam, and then from the front you want to grab your pin, put it down close to the edge and through, making sure you've caught that back piece. As you get to the curve, sometimes I find it's a little bit easier to do the curve. So I'm going to just pop this around the curve, come back to the front and pin it, and then I can go back and sort of do this little bit here. So it is a little bit fiddly to get it right, but really, like I've said, is take your time, because that is how you are going to get the best looking binding. I'll do a couple more pins and then I'm going to switch to the tape just to show you the difference. I've done all the way up to the shoulder with the pins, and now I'm going to be doing the back, but I'm just going to prepare my tag. So I have little tags here that just have my business name, because as we get to the back, it's a great time to put any tags that you need to. With the double-sided tape, you can get this on Amazon. You should be able to get it from your local craft stores. And basically it is washable or wash away double-sided tape. So it's used in a lot of quilting. And what I'm going to do is lay this out, and then I'm going to put the tape on the seam, on the serged seam, like this. And I kind of do it in parts. So I pull back the tape, and then I start to get my binding, fold it over and stick. This is where I'm going to put my little tag. So I'm just going to put that in the middle there. I might need to pin this next little bit, but because there's no double-sided tape there, I'll just pin this here. Oops. So I'll pin this little bit here, like so. And now I'm just going along like I did with the pins, but instead of pins, I'm using this double-sided tape. And the whole idea is that you just want to be able to cover up that serged seam. So I'll put a bit more tape around the edge, grab it, fold it over and over again. So we've got our raw edge tucked under. I'm just going to continue to do that all the way along. And the best thing about the wash away tape is that it washes away. So that is why a lot of quilters use it. They use it to keep their squares, you know, steady, and I think a lot of their applique and bits and pieces. You could do the same with fabric glue if you prefer fabric glue and it's strong enough to hold. But I'm just going all the way along. Making sure that I enclose these seams. So I'll do the rest and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. All right, I'm at the last little bit. I'm going to fold it over. Oops. Like that. So we've got our twill tape is all enclosed. We've got our little tag here as well. It's going to be at the back. And we've got our tie enclosed over here as well. So now is the part where we're going to sew it. And this is what it's going to look like from the front. Just going to be super, super cute. I love getting sneak peeks halfway through. So I'm really happy with that colour match. I think the rust is looking really good. So now I'm going to take it over to my machine and we're going to top stitch all the way along. I've got a stitch length of 3 set up. So now all I'm going to do is very gently start to sew along the edge. So I'm trying to sort of line up with the edge here. And I'm just going to very slowly and gently sew along. And hopefully we're catching it at the back, which it looks like we are. So obviously this is the part doing it with the pins. I try to sort of pull the knit binding away from the edge a little bit as I sew. but that can be a little bit tricky, so don't worry too much. Again, we've got to make sure we don't catch our little knit tie. You can feel as well underneath where the binding is sitting, so that can be a good indication of if you're catching the back or not. But we'll just double check. So I've probably gone a little bit too in here, whereas here it doesn't look too bad. But my main concern is I like it to look nice on the front, which I've got a little bit funny here, but that's okay because it's not perfect. But we can just slowly go along, feeling as we go, and go all the way around. I'm now at the double-sided tape part, so it's the same as sewing with the pins. You just need to still go a little bit slow, and instead of having to stop to take your pins out, you just need to sort of stop and make sure that it's still looking good. So you can see I'm still catching the back. I did miss a little bit across the back here, so I probably will go back and just sew that down a little bit. But other than that, I'm sort of catching. Other than that, it's looking really good. So just going to keep going and going slow and finishing off my binding. So I'm coming to the end now. Going to carefully finish off. And we're done. Looking good. A little bit wonky in parts, but this is the underside, so the front doesn't look too bad. And I will go back and just fix this little part up, but then I'm going to take you over to the iron and we're going to give it a good steam. If you found that after you've finished sewing your binding it's a little bit wavy, just give it a gentle steam press and it will really help just flatten out those wavy seams. But it's looking good. I've caught everything at the back. I went back and fixed up that part. So I'm just going to finish pressing this and then we can move on to the next step. Coming along really nicely. So we are now going to attach our sleeves. This next few parts really do fly along quite quickly. So I'm going to take you to the overhead camera again. We're going to attach our sleeves and just watch how quickly this one gets finished. We're going to lay our pieces right side up. And I'm just going to get rid of this tie and we're focusing on the armhole. So I'm going to grab one of my arm pieces, my sleeves, and where the notch is, we're going to line that up with our shoulder seam. So I'm going to clip that in place. And then I usually like to do the ends. So I'll attach this one here and then this one here. And now what we're going to do is you shouldn't need to stretch or do anything to help this fit other than ease it around the curve. So I've just kind of matched up that point and I'll match up this side as well. And now on my serger, I'm going to serge along this edge, which will attach the sleeve, and then it will be all attached. So let's serge that one now. I've got my sleeve here at my serger. just going to place my ends under there like this. And now, like with other serging, I just like to make sure I've got my 2 raw edges, and sometimes I will do a couple of stitches just to make sure it's on there and secure. And now I'm just going to gently go around the curve, making sure my 2 raw edges are always aligned and that it's nice and flat underneath. And I can just maneuver it around until I serge it off. So that is our sleeve, our first sleeve on. So I'm going to repeat to the other side before we move on. We've got both our sleeves attached here. Now for the next piece, or for the next step, we're going to baste the 2 pieces together so that we're then working with 1 piece. We want to make sure that our piece with the front tie piece is on top. So we want to make sure this one is on top. And we're now going to, put the back out of the way, lay these pieces over the top like this. And what we want to do is we want to line up our markings that we did when we cut it out. So there's 2 little markings here, and I'm just going to put a little clip in here, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it to my machine and I'm just going to baste around this little curve here. So I'm going to baste this and then I'll bring it back. For this part, we're now going to attach our gusset. So I've got one of my gusset pieces and I'm going to attach it right sides together. So with the printed sides together, I'm going to line up my mark with the mark on my crotch. And now what I'm going to do is get this piece and I'm going to maneuver it down and around, and I want the end to line up with the mark we made on our legs. So I'm just going to line up my raw edges like that. So essentially what we're going to do is we'll end up sort of sewing around it. Same on this side, lining up the end here. Pop a little clip in. And we're going to serge around here. But what I might do is actually get the other side prepared as well, so I can do them at the same time. So lay my back piece out, get my other gusset piece. Again, I'm lining up my little mark in the middle with the top of the crotch. And just pop a clip in. Then it might help to bring it around. You're going to bring that leg piece around and match up the end with a clip, and bring that other leg piece around and secure it with a clip as well. And the reason we need a gusset piece for this is because essentially we are 3D, so if we sort of just had it like this, there wouldn't be a whole lot of room here. You need that gusset to really account for your crotch really, and particularly with babies, they often have nappies on, so you just need that extra space underneath to accommodate for your bottom and your body basically. So I'll take you to the serger and we will serge these on. I'm starting with the front piece. I'll pop my presser foot up and put my fabric underneath, and I'm just going to do those couple of stitches to make sure that it's on, and it just gives me that little bit of extra security to kind of maneuver the fabric around, because you do want to make sure when you do this that you're not catching anything underneath, so it can just be a little bit of maneuvering it around. So I'm just kind of using my fingers and my hands to get it placed so that I've got my 2 raw edges together. I'm stretching that little bit underneath, and then I'm just going to gently go around the curve, take this one out, And obviously we want to really make sure we're catching this top bit. So I'll just pull it all so it's together. We want to try and eliminate any bumps or ridges. Again, bring it around. And then I'm just going to line up these last bits as I sew. So that is our first gusset piece done. So it's all nice and enclosed in here. So I'll repeat to the back and then we can move on. We've attached our gusset pieces. It's got these little gusset pieces now. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to sew up the side seams and attach our foot cuffs. So let's do that one now. To sew up our inseam, we just need to place our garment with right sides together. And then I like to sort of align my gusset pieces. Get some clips ready. So I'll clip that there. Then obviously line up your leg pieces like this. Pop a clip in here. And get all your little tails out the way. Line it up, clip it. I'll put one more clip along here. And then all I'm going to do is serge across the top here. We've serged along the bottom here. Now we get to do our cuffs. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to take my leg cuff pieces, fold them so that the short sides come together like this. I'm just going to very quickly serge along the bottom. There's one and two. And now what I'm going to do is fold my cuffs so that they are wrong sides together, right sides out. Can help if you just trim off your little tails so you don't get confused. That is our first leg cuff. Like this. I'll do the same to the other one. So I've got my two leg cuffs ready. Now all I need to do is line up my side seams. So when I'm doing this, I need to obviously make sure that my tie is on the inside because I don't want to catch it. I don't want to serge it off. And then I like to always line up my underarm seams first. So I'm going to line that up and put a clip there. And then for the sleeves, just going to pop another clip along here. And then I'm just going to line up down the sides like this. So I can make sure all this is out of the way. Pop a clip in here. And just all the way down, making sure you've got your two raw edges aligned. And then repeat to the other side, and then we're going to serge it. I've clipped it all. Now I just need to, on my serger, serge down the sides. I like to, when I get to my underarms, just take it really slow and nest my seams as well. So I have one seam going down and one seam going up. Helps to reduce bulk. And then when we get to our tie, we obviously want to make sure that it's on the inside and we're not going to serge it off. Like that. And then I can just go all the way to the end. For the second side, what we want to make sure we're being careful of is our twill tab. So bringing this down, and around. And then just making sure that this tab is nice and flat when we sew it. Trust me, I've done things before where it's been half up or folded. I do it with my labels all the time. So just make sure it's nice and flat. Sew it over. And then we can go all the way to the end. And as you see, it's nice and enclosed. We've sewn our side seams, we've sewn our inseam, we've got our cuff pieces ready. So now all we need to do is turn it the right way out. Admire our beautiful work because it is looking so, so cute. Got our little ties ready. Now we need to attach our leg cuffs. So what I like to do is get my leg cuff, I place it over my leg piece. I will generally line up the seam of the cuff with the leg inseam. So I'll pop a clip there. And then on these smaller ones, what I generally do is I just kind of stretch it out so that I've got the 3 raw edges aligned, and I'll just pop a clip on the other side because they're quite small. It's what I tend to do on cuffs as well for adults. If it's something bigger like a neckline, I'll always quarter it, but if I'm just doing something small like a sleeve or a cuff, I just kind of stretch it out to fit. So I'll do the same on the other side. Again, I want to slide the cuff over, line up my 2 seams, so with the leg, the inseam and the seam of my cuff. I put a clip in, give it a gentle stretch so that it kind of fits. Put a clip in on this side. And now we're ready to serge those on. To attach the cuffs, there's kind of 2 ways to do it. So I'm going to show you both ways. You can serge from the top or you can serge from underneath. I generally am a top person, so I will kind of stretch it out, get it under my foot. Again, I like to do my couple of stitches on, and then what I do is I like to have my cuff up. I kind of fold it out so I'm serging around, and then I gently stretch as I go, and I'm just pulling it around and stretching as I go, always making sure I've got 3 raw edges on this one and trimming off a little bit as I go as well, just so I know that I'm catching it all. And then we just finish in the round and I clip it off. Some people will tie it off, some will serge their ends back in or thread them back through. I find I'm pretty happy with just clipping it off. So that is one side. The other way you can do it is to go from the inside. So it's essentially the same thing, just in reverse. So I pop it under there, do a couple of stitches on, and then I'm always just making sure I've got my 3 edges, and I'm just going around like this. So really it's personal preference. You get the same result in the end. I just find sewing from the outside and flipping it up a lot easier. But each to their own. So again, it's the exact same result. I've got my cuff on, but I've done it from the inside. Now we're going to attach our cuffs. I did the same as what I did to their leg cuffs in terms of I folded the short ends together, serged them, and then folded them over. So it's exactly the same as the leg cuff. I slide it over. I tend to line up with the seams so that we've got all our seams are matching. Put a clip on. I really only do one clip for this, particularly because it's so small. If I had a bigger one, like an adult one or a larger child, I would probably do 2, but I just gently stretch it to fit. And then when I sew, I'll make sure that I line up all 3 raw edges, and then I attach those. So I'm going to attach these cuffs. If you are having trouble, you can always go back and see what we did for the leg cuffs, but I'm going to attach these cuffs and then we can move on to the final steps. Okay, I have attached my cuffs. It's looking mighty, mighty cute. The last 2 things that we need to do is we need to sew down our tie and attach our snaps. So I'm going to take you over to my normal machine to sew this down, and then I'll get my snaps out and I'll show you where to put the snaps, and then we'll be done. So let's get these bits done. To sew our tie down, all I've done is bring the one that is on the curve out, and I've just lined it up with the edge, and I've actually brought my stitch length down to a 2.5, and I'm just going to pop a couple of stitches along here to secure it. So I will back stitch this because it is sort of an integral part. I'm just going to go back and forth, and that is our tie attached. Final thing we need to do is attach our snaps. So I've got my snap press here. I use an industrial one because I like that it's nice and heavy duty. And then I've got these metal snaps here, these metal pronged snaps. So what we're going to do is we're going to have on our left side piece where we've got our short twill tape, we're going to have it so that the stud, so that the back of the snap is here, so it will be visible. And we're going to have the socket side here. So what I do is I'm going to put it all in my machine. Pop my stud there. Line it up. And the reason that we have the twill tape is basically for extra stability. So that is our first one done, and it's got that nice extra stability so that it hopefully won't rip out of our fabric. To do the other side, we're going to put our stud back there, or our snap back, put our stud in. Now just make sure we've got it right. So what we want to be able to do is get our piece and pop it there. So I'm going to get this like that, bring it out, attach it, and now I have my other press stud. So all I need to do is attach them like that. Perfect. We've got our press studs done. Now all I need to do is tie this in a little bow like this. And it's done. Is that not the most adorable little Bear Hug Wrap Romper you've ever seen? So I'm so happy with how this turned out. My binding looks really good. I did have to unpick some parts and redo it, but I'm happy with it. We've caught all the little bits on the back. We've got some cute little cuffs. We've got our little foot cuffs as well. It's just an adorable romper. I hope that you got some value out of this. Make sure you like and subscribe to both the Peekaboo channel and the Sew and Tell Australia channel. If you've got any questions, you can pop them in the comment box below and either Peekaboo or myself will answer them. The link to the pattern is also in the comment box below, and any other things that are relevant to making this little romper. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Share all your makes with me. I'd love to see them. Tag me on Instagram and Facebook, and make sure you share it in the Peekaboo Pattern Shop group. So enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one.